All right. Is this on? People hear me? All right, sweet. Yeah. So thank you all for coming here today. After lunch, it's always fun being the after lunch talk because hopefully you pull people away from enjoying their food and snacks and coffee and all that. So thank you all for being here. And so yeah, effectively today, what we'll be taking you through is a workshop, and as the slide in front of you all says, it's about making OpenStack easy and basically learning about how Project Sunbeam, which is an open source project sponsored and developed by Canonical, effectively lowers entry barriers to using OpenStack. And then today, I have a few folks helping here. So myself, I'll be kind of the primary speaker, and then we have Billy Olsen here over on stage left that'll be walking around and helping everyone. So kind of diving into it. First things first, obviously introductions. So my name is Jason C. Nucciarone. I am a high-performance computing engineer that works at Canonical. So my kind of area of expertise is working with HPC clusters and basically how to deploy all the fun gaggle of services that come along with it and how to address challenges of moving beyond, say, like static Beowulf cluster. Billy, he is a OpenStack engineering director. So basically the captain of all the OpenStack related teams. So under his kind of department, he focuses on our Ceph team, oven teams, compute teams, so HPC, and a whole bunch of other people like Foundations, so packaging OpenStack for the Ubuntu operating system, and then also the Sunbeam team as well. And even though you see two of us here in the meat space, we actually have two people that will be in cyberspace also helping with this workshop today. So the first person is James Page. He's a principal engineer who works on the OpenStack org. So he kind of bounces around all of the teams, but is very much focused on like the Foundations and Sunbeam aspect. And then we have Guillaume here, and he is a software engineer who does a lot of work on Sunbeam. So maybe this workshop will be a great opportunity to collect some feedback. So first, before we kind of get into the content of the workshop here, we just wanted to go ahead and do a little bit of housekeeping. So something that I like to do for workshops that I put together is that we always get through the fun access credentials part, so then that way we can kind of spend more time focusing on the talk, and then when we actually go to the interactive component, we're not just spending all the time trying to get through setup. And as I like to put it, let's avoid exercising your laptop fan. So obviously OpenStack, it's a pretty big, heavy application that you have to deploy, and so obviously we don't just like want to murder your work issued laptops by saying like, hey, go deploy this thing and enable a bunch of permissions that I think your cybersecurity department will go insane and start screaming. So yes. So first things first, we actually have this QR code up here, or if you read the URL at the bottom there, you can enter that into your web browser. This will be kind of how we'll be providing live support throughout the event. So if you're in the Zoom, you should see James Page just kind of hanging out, chilling out. He'll be there to answer any questions that come in through chat. And then Guillaume and also James, they'll be watching the Matrix room as well, so you can chat there. And then one thing to kind of note is that Matrix, it's a decentralized protocol, something that the Ubuntu community has really started using over the past year. So if you don't have a Matrix account, feel free to just make one on matrix.org, and you can use the app maintained by the company Element called Element. So give a few seconds for everyone to do that, and then we'll move on to the next kind of setup step here. Okay, thumbs up. Is everyone good? Have logged in? All right, sweet. Okay, I got one more person here, so we'll give them some time.
Dumb question. For an element, where do we click on to type in
the URL? Yes, yes. Now it's always very fun. I love the matrix.2 server or website because it really helps people get used to using Matrix, because obviously the centralized communication protocols are always interesting because some chat servers run in people's basements while others are actually maintained by companies. So yes, but if you need the link throughout, just let me know. And then we're both charging our laptops because it seems like the electrical situation here is a little interesting, but we can bring any information around if you need it. But we'll go ahead and move along here. So the next thing that you're going to want to go ahead and do is that we've actually spun up a public jump host that you can actually go ahead and log into. And so basically what this will allow is for you to get access to our cloud where we have a lot of the bastions spun up so that you can start deploying and working with Sunbeam. So that way, we get around having to use your personal machine. So if you just SSH into that address there, I see a framework, so some Linux people. If you type that in, you should be able to get to our jump host that we have posted. And then you can see it up here. We have a password. So you just type that in and then you'll be able to log in as that user. After you have adequate power, you can come closer. And then that way, you don't have to squint at the screen. I don't bite, I promise. Yes. How much did it cost, Billy? No, it's when he told me about it, I was like, wait, .rocks is the domain name? I was like, yeah, or it's a top level domain name. So yeah, I'll give everyone just like half a minute here to go ahead and do that. And then, like I said, if you need any information, me and Billy are here so we can jump around and help you out. And also we have the slides hosted on Sketch. So if you want to download the PDF and kind of follow along at your own pace, something that's a little bit more comfortable for you, that works as well. All right. Can I get a thumbs up? How are folks doing? Good? Okay, we'll move on to the next thing. And so, all right. If you were here before we got started here, at this point, once you're connected to the jump host, you'll want to go ahead and actually log into a bastion. So Billy, for the folks that are in the room, he went around earlier and gave everyone an IP address for a system that we have and a host name. So if you just type that in, you'll be able to log in. And then if you're currently attending online, I actually have no idea how many people are in the virtual call, but James, you can ask him and he'll be able to kind of give you some access information. So yeah, now with that, let everybody type that SSH command out, let me know if it's not working, and then we'll go from there. Need someone to break the awkward silence, All right, thumbs up. Okay, all right. I like how this is going, It's fun having people who know how to use SSH. All right. So now that we've gone through the setup here, I just have like a bit of content to, maybe help present a problem statement that we have here. So, obviously the title of the workshop is, how Sunbeam lowers barriers to, or entry barriers into getting to OpenStack. And, the idea is, it's like, well, what exactly is Sunbeam? I think that's an important thing to explain before we go ahead and start using it. So I kind of have this question posed up here where, so why do we really need an OpenStack cloud with a low barrier to entry? Don't current solutions adequately get the job done? Well, we'll jump over here. We have a fake example email from William Nelson, no connotations at all. But the idea is that I think something that's been very omnipresent within the OpenStack community at large, or OpenInfra community at large, is situations going on with a certain specific vendor who happens to specialize in selling wares related to virtual machines. But the idea is that, as a lot of companies, if you've seen the news, VMware has been really jacking up the rate for quite a lot of folks. And so obviously that's not great, from a budget perspective. So effectively, you can look at some of the percentages that have been thrown out there where it's like, dectupling, which is like times 10 the current renewal fee. And so in this email here, you get told, hey, so our current, rate is going up, it's increasing. And so now we want to actually evaluate looking at OpenStack as kind of a replacement for that, something that's more open source, ideally lower cost, not as like much vendor lock-in per se. And the idea is that, like, okay, we want to have this investigation done over the course of a week. And if you'll kind of be able to read the last sentence there, please have a report to me by the end of day on October 15th with the results of your investigation. And there's just a problem with that. Yeah, that's today. So yeah, wait, today is October 15th, and I only have 6 hours. William Nelson, he's based out of this small little place, you might know it, Arizona. So I have a little bit more time to work with here due to the time zone shift being in Eastern time.
Very good.
Yeah, I did. I didn't read it though, until now. But yeah, so today is October 15th, and obviously we kind of have the elephant in the room of we have 6 hours, not 6 months. So now at this point, it's like, okay, I need to actually have an educated opinion about using OpenStack, but I can't go through all the motions of like setting up the hardware, acquiring it, and actually going ahead and finding a deployment solution. And so obviously we say we mustn't panic. We can recover from this. Maybe I should have checked my inbox a little sooner so I could have given a more appropriate sizing. And then this is kind of the general feeling. This is a fun movie. I can't remember the name of it, but it has like all the clay birds. You can see them there. Chicken Run, obviously freaking out. I remember watching it when I was like younger, and it's like one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I remember like certain scenes, but you totally forget the name. But yes, you say we mustn't panic, but you end up panicking. So now you have this situation where you're feeling all dark and stormy. You're like, oh, well, how am I going to awkwardly explain that I didn't log in and check my email? That deliverable is going to be late. We're going to have to renew. We're going to spend so much money, all that, feeling dark and stormy. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if instead something could come in, help break the storm, help break the dark clouds and feeling of despair, and instead shine some beautiful sunlight on our, industrial needs or something? And we have just the project for that. And it's called Sunbeam, obviously. So how does Sunbeam come to my rescue here as someone who doesn't read his emails maybe when he should? And so effectively, what Sunbeam is that it is a OpenStack distribution that you can use or deploy and let Kubernetes manage a lot of the core services for you. And so if you're kind of wondering, like, okay, what might be the benefits of Sunbeam, say, to other solutions that maybe try and attempt the same thing, is that first, Sunbeam aims to be simple. So basically able to deploy, fully functional OpenStack cloud that scales to your needs, but also not, comes with the complexity of that. It's also developer friendly. So many of us in here kind of wear different hats. Some of us are dedicated infrastructure engineers, but like myself, I'm much more focused on like HPC. So deploying HPC clusters, actually doing things with that. So I wouldn't call myself an OpenStack expert, but definitely someone who needs to be a consumer of OpenStack. The other benefit of it as well is that it's collaborative. So instead of just being like one thing that only one person knows, has all those unspoken rules, it's something that a lot of different folks can use and work together with. And then the other thing, last thing, is that it's very lightweight. So one thing that's nice is that Sunbeam can be very quickly deployed. You still have to wait a bit. It's definitely not just like apt install, some different service. But the idea is that compared to other deployment solutions, it's very secure and reliable. And you can get it quickly rather than having to go through the whole, long process of actually kind of speccing out and designing your OpenStack system. So now that I've kind of given you maybe a little pitch there about kind of the different benefits of using Sunbeam, you could say it sounds cool, but you might want to know, how does it work? Everything good over there? Or did we get a question? Okay, all right. Sorry, I saw you reading. I wasn't sure if somebody sent like a comment or something. But yes, now it sounds cool. How does it work? Well, to kind of go ahead and get a high-level, say, architecture for how Sunbeam works, we have this diagram here. So you can see a lot of different things. So we kind of have on the stage right part here, where I'm standing. The first bits that we have is kind of the cloud management and governance. So here, you'll kind of see some things that I say more a little specific to what Canonical works on. So we have MOZ, which is an acronym for Metal as a Service. We have Juju, which is like an orchestrator that we work on and develop. Then you have obviously the standard old OpenStack. And then well, you'll notice in the control plane, that's the aspect that's managed by Kubernetes there. It uses microK8s, which is like a certified Kubernetes distribution that Canonical works on. You'll see a lot of the different, control services that you might be familiar with as part of like OpenStack deployments. So we have like Nova, MySQL, Keystone, Glance, all that. That's managed by Kubernetes. And then we kind of have the then cloud data plan, which is managed by a hypervisor, which is like, kind of the compute aspect. So you have Kumu, Open vSwitch, all that. And then you have the storage component, which is then microSeph, which is basically a distribution of Ceph, but micro. So that's how I like to put it. And so you'll get a lot of the kind of core components there, like the Ceph OSDs and then the Ceph MONs as well.
And just additional information here, like cloud data plane, where you're running these. So this is on a hypervisor, running your OS, but then these are running an actual in SAP containers. So if you guys are familiar with the SAP But you hear pull the button down, pull it down. Yeah. Okay. Testing. Okay.
Hey, there you are.
Yeah. So everything's running in a container in this particular scenario. So you have control plane pieces running actually in Kubernetes, and then data plane pieces actually running in containers that we call snap containers. So if you're not familiar with the snaps, it's a rootfs and sandbox file system that's kind of sitting over there using AppArmor to confine it and provide different security measures. And we run in all strictly confined mode, which means we have only access to the parts of the system that we actually need to have access to. And and it's a very minimal set of permissions as we kind of drive forward and look at it that way. So even if you were to have like some sort of security escape from a virtual machine that's running inside here, it can only access what's exposed in the same snap that it has. It can't access as an escape to other parts of the system, which is a convenient convenient security sandbox that we'll continue to explore further. In the Microsoft pieces, Microsoft also comes as a snap. Of course, we chose the name Microsoft at some point in time. It's kind of a branding issue to a degree, where we have micro X, micro Y, micro Z, micro whatever. What we like to think about it from when it comes to Microsoft is micro is for the operational overhead and how to think about actually deploying it and putting things together. Oftentimes when you see a micro X at Canonical or from an Ubuntu product or things like that, it's typically around something like snap install and get going at that point in time to try and reduce the operational overhead and the operational burden that it takes to plan your deployments, look at what different pieces look like for actual operational challenges where a disk falls out. How do you actually manage the disk and how do you actually do different pieces? It's all baked right into the different products, whether it's Microsoft, MicroK, Micro, whatever it happens to be. You'll also see that there's pieces of things like micro oven and things. So the intention is to get people started really quickly to help with clustering and things like that. So,
and on the topic of clustering, that's when we come into multi-node mode with bots. And so obviously, as Billy kind of mentioned there, we have the micro aspect where effectively it's just like as minimal overhead as possible, snap install, get started. We try to do basically the same thing also for like actually, doing multi-node operations. So Sunbeam, while it supports, single node operation, and that's kind of what we'll be doing today to help get a feel for it, you can actually scale up Sunbeam from kind of like this really minimal kind of developer sandbox playing around to actually going up to enterprise level clouds where it's like, okay, you have multiple nodes being enlisted and actually being used in some meaningful way. And so what this diagram up here kind of shows is like how it all comes together, kind of, I guess I wouldn't necessarily say at a rudimentary level, but all the different components that are at play. So Billy, if you had anything you wanted to kind of specifically comment on.
I mean, this is just a standard architecture. It's a hyper-converged architecture. So you can see that we've got your hypervisors running with your storage with control planes running there. You can choose what your actual architecture looks like. In this particular one, it's chosen as a hyper-converged. You could choose, I'm just going to run these as a control node. You can say, I'm just going to run this as a storage node. I'm just going to run this as a compute node. And you basically define the roles that you're actually putting out there. MAS is an optional component. So if you're at home and you want to try this in your home lab or something like that, you probably don't have a bare metal provisioning tool. And so we allow you to basically snap install it and cluster it and do it on your own. If you do have MAS for like a data center type environment, you can actually describe your deployment within MAS, and you can say, go into each machines or all the machines that you have. You can do it through APIs and stuff as well, but you can say, this disk, these are my Ceph disks. This is my network for my physical networks for FizzNet 1. This is FizzNet 2. This is FizzNet 3, so that you can actually then map your overall OpenStack networks onto those particular networks that you've defined within MAS. And that exists at the MAS layer, and the project Sunbeam will detect what that is and make that happen on the deployment. So you describe what your bare metal solution should look like, and Sunbeam just makes it happen.
Hence the micro. Very
look like you're going to say something, right? No? Okay.
Wait. Yes. Yeah. So, definitely hence again the micro there where it's like, okay, you're able to kind of have this nice composable or hyper-converged architecture, but also like you don't need a PhD to do it. You can kind of follow along, do tutorials, and actually set it up yourself. And then once again, you can kind of scale from, say, the more developer type scenario where it's like, hey, you just have some extra, space in your computer at home and actually want to get started, but then it still actually has the chops to scale up to, production use cases. And so then kind of moving along here, we have the various different components at play. So I know that typically with like OpenInfra, you can generally hopefully assume that most folks are pretty well familiar with OpenStack, but then there's kind of some little, I guess I could say like special sauce there of how different components work. So just kind of want to give like a very quick overview of say like what Moz is. And so effectively what you're seeing up here is Moz is a bare metal provisioner. And I like to always give the joke, it allows you to fully leverage your massive amounts of hardware, massive amounts of hardware, but I know it's kind of a dad joke, but it makes me chuckle a bit.
You make a great father.
Yes, yeah. I got to prepare, and so ideally, kind of what you're seeing here is the diagram of kind of very high level overview of how Moz works, where effectively you have different Linux distributions. So you have like CentOS, Red Hat, Ubuntu, VMware, ESXi, or Windows. And then effectively what Moz is able to do is be kind of that layer that actually allows you to deploy and provision those operating systems on, basically hardware provided from wide majority of providers. So like you'd be IBM, Dell, Lenovo, or even Supermicro or the Open Compute Project. And so that's kind of the role that it plays, is being able to allow like, you to actually harness and take advantage of your bare metal hardware. And to actually orchestrate all this, and something that you then saw kind of in the high level overview of how Sunbeam works, is Juju, which I had mentioned earlier is a lifecycle orchestrator that basically helps deploy services. And one fun thing that I always get, when I talk about Juju and how great it is, because that's what I work with a lot, is actually writing charm operators for use with Juju, is, oh, sounds cool, but isn't it just Ansible with a bunch of extra little sauce? And I say, no, it's different. And so effectively, what you're seeing up here is kind of how you have a lot of different deployment solutions for actually managing and setting up applications or setting up infrastructure. And so kind of what this helps to is show like, okay, what do you actually get provided from each service? So if you look up top, kind of in the orange there, you'll see Juju and a whole bunch of different aspects that it's able to do. So for example, network infrastructure, it can integrate applications, actually install and set up those applications, and then kind of then actually automate the day two operations aspect of that with backup, recovery, upgrades, and all that. And then one thing that isn't shown by this graphic here, but Juju is actually able to do is there is a Terraform provider. So you can actually write your infrastructure deployments in Terraform, and then through that Juju provider, your Terraform can actually talk to Juju and deploy your applications. So one thing you'll notice is like, wow, that sounds all great. And so what I say is, yes, it's magic. That's how I like to put it. People will be like, well, tell me how Juju works. It's like you can give this very long and verbose explanation, or you could say, oh, it's magic. It's kind of derived from a Western African term, Juju, which usually translates into magic. And the idea is that like, oh, it really takes a lot of kind of the pain out of actually setting up and deploying your services by kind of encoding a lot of those operations. And so then, a little sad there that PowerPoint lost my magic wand. I put the magic wand emoji in there, but yes, magic with charms. And so effectively, when you saw in that high level diagram, you saw like the different applications that OpenStack had. So you had like Glance, all that. And so effectively how we're able to actually go ahead and deploy those services with Sunbeam is through the use of charms. And so what charms are is basically just like operations as code, as I like to say. So if you look at like the center of the screen here, you'll have application. So you can kind of think of that as like a core OpenStack service. And so effectively then what you'll have is actually like code that kind of goes around a lot of those common operations that it might have, whether it's like logging and auditing, how to handle that, how to actually set up identity management, and then also manage secrets as well, if you have some confidential information and all that. And then able to supply other things like upgrades and observability for getting insight into how your services are performing. And lastly, just kind of how that Terraform bit actually goes in and pops in is it basically says like, okay, talking with Juju, how do we go ahead and actually deploy and set up these charms to get them to talk to each other? So yeah, I'd say that's pretty much the high level overview. So now, obviously, let's get to the meat. Let's get to the fun part, which is actually getting the hands-on experience of working with Sunbeam. So I like to say, here it is. Time to turn your attention to the terminal, and let's get some experience. So just a quick, thumbs up real quick. How many people are still logged into your terminal windows? Make sure that you didn't, dip out here. So one thing I will say is that I have an incentive for participating. I actually have some stickers here, because obviously I know specifically, everybody's like, oh, well, why do I want to come do a bunch of extra work? Why can't I just sit here and listen and all that? And I say, thank you for coming to participate. So if you do actually ask questions, and you could even buddy up and actually work with other people as well. That's totally fine. You'll go ahead and get some stickers here. That's how I like to do it. So yes, actually jumping into the workshop here now. Logged in. This is kind of the series of commands that go ahead and have you run here. So obviously, if you're familiar with OpenStack, the source OpenRC, that just basically contains kind of the access information for actually working with OpenStack. And then kind of the second command here is actually getting the instance that we're going to be working with. Then we're just going to go ahead and SSH into it and then verify that Sunbeam is installed. So give us, everyone, just maybe a few minutes here to just go through these commands. And then when you're good, or if you need any help, just let me know. Going back here. And do that school teacher thing where I stand behind all of you and make sure that you're participating. I'm not sure if anyone's ever had it where they had a teacher when you're doing a quiz that would come up behind you and lean like this. Oh yeah, and they make you think you're doing it wrong, but you're doing it right. But what they're trying to do is get you to doubt yourself. I have an average GPA to maintain. Yes, so I'll repeat that just so the recording can catch it. But this machine that we're SSHing into here, basically it's been pre-provisioned as kind of a sandbox for actually going ahead and deploying Sunbeam. And so one thing that we do if we have the workshop bastions is that we can actually support multi-node mode. But for today, we're just going to do single node mode to kind of get the experience of oh, it's the OpenStack that you know and love. And the idea is that having these machines is just kind of easy way to provide a really base, clean environment for you to work off of. Yes.
So the OpenStack serverless that we run here, that cloud is itself is outside of the cloud.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Yeah.
That cloud is
Not this one, but usually it is. There's a different. We have a lab where we run constant tests every 2 cycles. So it's charmed on that. Sunbeam is typically there's another. So Sunbeam 0 is the high. There's no high. Right? Sunbeam 0 is no high. Sunbeam 0 is it will become an all-in-one. It will be now. You would still no this is accessing the undercloud. This is an instance on top of cloud, and we're giving you that.
Yeah. That's the fun thing about orchestration is that you can deploy a cloud on top of your cloud and then deploy a cloud on top of that. Yeah. So the idea here is, as Billy had mentioned, we're using an undercloud here to kind of be able to provide and actually orchestrate the resources here. And so what that's using is charmed OpenStack, on which you could basically say it's been around for quite a while. And the idea is that kind of charmed OpenStack, whereas I like to look at it, Sunbeam is kind of a continuation of that, but kind of more looking at more of that hybrid architecture where you have both like machines and with those containerized applications using snaps, but then also having kind of Kubernetes then with like the pod scheduling and all that. And then the idea is that charmed OpenStack is more like a machine cloud, so that we'll use like snaps and devs and all that. And the idea is that like, okay, that's what we use to provision our partner cloud, but then actually now we can deploy Sunbeam on top of that as well.
We need a nice space to give everyone quick access, and doing a cloud is perfect.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
As it turns out.
So just to check in here, is everyone SSH'd into Sunbeam 0? Thumbs up. I'm all I'm proud. Okay, excellent. So kind of moving on here, now that we've gone through the preparatory work of actually connecting to the instance where we're going to go ahead and deploy Sunbeam, we're actually going to go ahead and deploy it. So if you'll go ahead and look at these instructions here, the top level one that we have, this is a prepare node script. And effectively what this does is it actually runs some operations on the machine to actually prepare it to deploy Sunbeam. And so the idea is that Sunbeam prepare node script will actually just go ahead and actually print out a script for you to execute. So that way you can actually inspect it, see what you do in the machine. Because obviously you could say how many times people have just trustingly did like curl dash something and actually pulled bash script off the internet, which is like we don't like. So obviously we want to give the opportunity to inspect that script. And the idea to actually then execute it is we'll go ahead and pipe it to bash. And then we'll kind of create a new group called snap daemon. And then that way we're added to the current profile. So then that way we can actually go ahead bootstrap our cluster.
And the prepare node script, like that exists because of some of the strict confinement that I was talking about earlier with our snap packages and things like that. Is when you're running within that snap ecosystem and you're strictly confined, you have very, very limited access to what you can do. On the host, there's a lot of different things that are secure. And part of that prepare node script is actually like making sure that you have Juju installed and a couple of other things that are actually installed. And so you can't actually do that within the OpenStack snap. We could have done this as here's your list of instructions to actually go and set up. It's perfectly fine, but we've chosen to do a prepare node script and long-term try and actually resolve these issues so that goes away. But for now, it's because of all the strict confinement and security issues that we go through.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely one thing. I mean, kind of say about snaps is that they're nice in that they provide like a very strict sandbox. And so the idea is that like, oh, you can actually declare what your snap is allowed to actually have access to, and it uses AppArmor to effectively manage those rules. And the idea is that, as Billy had kind of mentioned, there are certain things that you can't do from a snap. And so the idea is that the prepare node script kind of helps you get around that without having to type out a whole bunch of instructions. And then kind of after you run that specific command to prepare your node, we'll actually go ahead and we'll go bootstrap the cluster using this command. So effectively, it'll just be Sunbeam cluster bootstrap and then accept defaults. So typically, you'll want to be able to configure your cloud to meet your expectations. But the idea is that if you're just trying to get started, which we're doing here, you can just pass the accept defaults cloud, and that'll go ahead and basically precede it with a bunch of reasonable defaults.
Good. Systems, be quiet.
Yes, workshop, we love it. Yes.
Well, Sunbeam 0 is effectively something that snap install Sunbeam.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Give me a second.
Yes.
Are you in the next channel? I think I saw you pop in, right? Yeah. Let me get you that. Other people might run into it as well. He's hitting proxy issues inside the lab.
Really?
Yeah.
No. It's the environment file.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Really? So obviously, if you run these commands here, the cluster bootstrapping process takes a hot minute. So I'll just show the slide real quick and then go back to the commands. But it'll take a bit for it to go. So we'll take a little bit of a break here to answer any questions or, walk around and help provide support. And with that said, gonna jump back around and help fix up the slide.
Into an issue with the proxy configuration settings. Some people may or may not have run into that same type of issue. And we can seed that into the Etsy environment file in that pull request. I thought it would be easier if I just gave you the pull request link. I sent it to you in Matrix. I thought it might be easier just to do that. Is anyone else running into the proxy thing? You're not. You might have an earlier bastion created.
Yeah.
You're good. You're good. You're good.
Yeah.
Are you
Okay.
in it? That's great. Awesome. Did you have access to? Did you get access to? Okay. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. And you're going. I think Julian, you probably got an instance that was booted off of a previous iteration that didn't have the proxy.
Which one did you give him?
02 or something.
Oh yeah.
3. Okay. 1 through 3 were created earlier. Okay, 2's working.
Yeah, that was the one
Sorry,
that
Jim.
I was testing off of. So I set everything up the way it needed to be.
Not that
There you
it
go.
matters, but what's the typical deploy timeline look like for time framing? Like hour, 30 minutes, 15?
It varies.
Varies.
So like the typical, it kind of depends on your bandwidth because it's going to pull a whole bunch of container images down. It's going to depend on speed of this, stuff like that. So, I mean, usually within 20 minutes, you can have it up and running for a single node. It depends on also how complex your configuration is. So doing the quick cluster bootstrap in this way should be pretty quick. I think we did it in 10 minutes the other day on this cloud, but
Okay.
yeah.
Also, there's
Yeah,
Right.
when there was
Right.
only one of us.
Under ideal circumstances, it happens faster,
Yeah.
right? It also depends. There's an opportunity in a way for describing a repeatable deployment. We call it a manifest, where you actually specify these are the parameters I want you to actually bootstrap this cloud with and deploy this cloud with. These are the optional features we want you to turn on. These are the different things that we want to have our cloud configured as. And those will take more time because there's more stuff going on there under the covers. But 20 minutes-ish, you get your first cloud. Yes, that's a really, really good question.
That is a great question.
So the way that you specify the version of OpenStack is when you do this snap install of OpenStack, which we didn't take you guys through for timeliness and sake. We had already preceded. But what you would do is snap install OpenStack and you give it a -- channel and you say 2024.1/stable, or it's yoga/stable, or so you basically describe it there. Yes. How would you use custom OpenStack containers? Okay, so that's an interesting question, and I have a mixed response. In the manifest file that we have, you can specify what the different resources and attachments are so that you would specify your own custom OCI at that point in time. Now, it's a mixed response because we do it for our own testing purposes, but we don't end-to-end test that solution coming together. So there may be your mileage may vary. But if you hop into the channel, if you run into something like that, we can work with you on that and kind of figure out how to get there. But that's how we do it. No. No, not today. No. Yeah. Master's a little tricky because we have to generate an OCI image off it at that point in time. It's an interesting quest to go on of basically like. Yeah, so it could be in theory. Although DevStack, I think you also kind of hack on it at the exact same time. Yeah. It's an interesting thought experiment. I think it would actually be really interesting to go after there. Like build me my stuff on the fly as I do it. Interesting idea, Simon. I like it. It's like bleeding edge.
So yeah, this is the transition slide here. So if any folks have any questions, obviously we covered a lot of content and also went through some commands. So this is a great opportunity while you wait for your Sunbeam cloud to deploy. So yes.
Is Sunbeam rebranding the OpenStack, or is it?
I think you heard Billy.
Yeah. So I guess there's a long and short answer to that. The long answer, or the short answer is MicroStack became Sunbeam, and Sunbeam. The longer answer is that Sunbeam is like all the open source project and how we actually advertise it within OpenInfra, and will never be a branded name on our side or anything like that. It's basically correct. Yeah. Yeah. Other question? Please. Okay. Right. Yeah, I have to ask in the matrix. I mean, we can poke at it at that. Yeah. So the progress indicator does come up at a portion of the way for people who are doing it. It'll show you, 12 of 21 services are deployed or something like that.
We're 4 and 24 right now.
Okay.
All right, who gets there first? Who wants to place bets?
Okay, let me just give you a new bastion. Yeah, yeah. Let me grab that.
Which one did you
Is
get?
there another question over here?
3. You got 3.
I
Okay.
got 3. We'll give him 9, I think.
Yeah, we have a couple spare ones, as we expected that some of the bastions might have issues.
And 4, 1, 6, 9, 5, 4. 254.1. /24.
No problem.
Like it's accelerated. Went from like 5 to 15.
You're doing it from
much
here.
faster
Yeah.
than it went from
You
0 to 5.
Yeah, so the idea is that the deployment progress, a lot of things are actually happening asynchronously. So instead of like having to go 1, 2, 3, 4, a lot of the processes.
OpenInfra Days at IU. It's
I want to make it a little bit difficult to hash, or if somebody finds our service.
I'll probably send it.
If you
Yeah,
have
it's
any
actually in the
problems,
matrix.
email me.
Yeah.
Now,
Is it gonna be like Microsoft?
We
Is
can
it like
register.
99%?
So, we have to register
99%
for you.
there, we'll wait another hour.
No. So the idea is like a lot of the services.
Not on our budget, you know.
Honestly, it's obviously
But,
it's not
yeah, that should
entirely
be a problem.
represented, but the idea is that
Oh,
a lot of things will be happening in Canada.
That's what you're looking for.
The idea is like.
University, you're not gonna expect
Allows
them to have-
everything better.
Oh, yeah.
Join us back.
Head out. It was good to see you. Are you in?
Or around on the floors. I don't understand.
Yeah, I'll be in the building.
You don't have.
All right, good.
Someone's not just USB everywhere.
Yeah,
Uh,
the hotel on that has USB ports.
Everywhere.
They, on the lamp there.
USB ports in my house. Every power socket now is a USB port.
Well, I gotta do that. That's on my next two, or maybe over winter or something.
Don't do it with all of them because it's expensive
Yeah,
and it feels like overkill.
yeah.
But
Definitely in the bedroom and in the kitchen, I think.
You'll be,
anyway, where I'm potentially going to put a lamp
um,
or a phone.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I've put a lot of the Q chargers. I had a whole new work surface put in and I've got Q chargers.
I ended up picking up a 3. It does my watch, it does my AirPods.
Yeah.
And my Apple, my iPhone.
Yeah.
On the same one plug.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've got one that's like it's flush. And it pops up. So it's got USB.
on,
Oh,
it's just, it's just.
Laptop now.
This is new one too.
well, that's.
So you can
You wanna give it a try? Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
So you use SSH to, OpenInfra Days. Sunbeam, actually,
I wrote mine in.
Whatever.
I couldn't, I didn't bring my code.
Finished.
It did?
Did I?
Good.
About that.
All right, you got somebody.
Oh, nice.
oh, is it?
You are.
23 of 24.
Ooh.
It's a little bit more
After adding OpenStack hyper.
Dot Sunbeam, so.
Dot.
Yeah, it's a dot, not a.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Just think, while you're waiting for the process to run, great opportunity to get coffee, get a bathroom break, check Reddit. Check your email.
I,
On it and make that work with something.
Hi. Do you?
yeah.
The remote participation two-way. Can you guys hear me?
Okay, now from here,
James, are you there?
you can SSH.
I am here, yeah.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Hey,
0.
what's up?
0.
I was just checking in.
Okay.
Voice mobile.
Everyone say hi to James. I don't think James can.
I haven't printed it here. So here you
It's embodied
go
voice.
more SSH in.
So-
Into your Sun.
So for the hypervisor, assuming this was multi-node,
Yes.
so you have your hypervisor, and we're running the OSDs for the Ceph and the Mons on the hypervisor.
Yes.
And then we're running Nova and OVN
Also to add.
in separate containers. So Nova's running that in a container that calls QEMU in another container
Can we just?
and then spins up a VM.
Yeah, so
Gonna do it.
The QEMU live on the bare metal.
Okay. You have to live on a bare mat.
yeah, so the idea is that like what we can do is that like snaps can actually walk to your machine, and so they're not like containers in the traditional sense where it's
Right.
OTI images, and so instead it's a squash
One of the
read-only file system that can be mounted with it.
Yeah, sorry, these were, I forgot these are snaps,
Yeah, yeah.
not containers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like, it's sort of like the same idea, but.
The gel is using app armor.
I know, it's like all the information, it's just like.
Yeah, and so the idea is that we can actually loop.
Jump with
and then sort of talk to the underwater
The slides, aren't they?
pretty easily.
Okay.
And the idea is that with like. That
I get, the slide.
Basically,
Okay.
all that snap.
Yes, you're welcome.
Interfaces that we.
Yeah, Corey, right? Yeah.
Okay. Then what allows like those calls outside of that armor.
Gotcha.
Can only be passed through. It can only be stuff that can be passed through. So we can do like fire. Why they're using microset
Right.
at the moment.
So yeah, you could still do like GPU pass through.
Yeah.
You could still do, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, real quick.
Okay.
Quite easy. Actually, I'll just join right now.
Then the other fun thing about snaps is that if you actually pass like the -- classic flag for snaps that have been granted that, you basically access like your whole system. And the idea is that you have like a immutable package that's separate from your base operating system. So that you get that like, oh, you know, you can kind of have like the edge software instead of like say what might be in like.
So like, I'm assuming that the snap stuff was the IOV.
That's right.
Yeah.
One here.
Yep.
Hey.
I have a free semester. Give it to you. For 3 months.
It's great.
Do I get a grading?
The question while I wait for my various stuff to run is, how do you go about customizing the configuration for a given OpenStack service?
Yeah, so, actually,
Fantastic.
after this, yeah, that slide will have like Sunbeam configure, and then that's basically how you can kind of set.
That's like.
People in the UK.
Yeah. 6 hours, 8 hours.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks, Corey.
How's it going? Has anyone got Sunbeam deployed yet? Thumbs up?
Wait, that wasn't 20 minutes.
Still got some time left, yay.
Does that answer your question for you? How long it takes roughly?
I think you should be suggesting they put a time in front of the deploy.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yes,
Well, really, it answers the question, you know, how long does it take to deploy what? 7 sunbeams? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know?
yeah. Fair trial by fire, yeah. Folks ready for us to move on then, or need just a little bit more time?
Bonded 100 gig helps.
Yeah, it does help the 100 gig.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on here. So now that we've deployed our Sunbeam Cloud, and we've kind of gotten to experience how long it takes to actually set it up, we'll go ahead and kind of move on to the next steps. So things first, we'll kind of go ahead and actually run our Sunbeam configure here, and what this will basically allow us to do is kind of set some reasonable defaults. So stock command up here, Sunbeam configure -- accept defaults, OpenRC demo RC. That'll configure the Sunbeam cloud and kind of apply some reasonable base defaults. And then after that, we'll have the OpenRC file. So if you remember from earlier, using that under cloud to actually go ahead and access the instance that we were going to deploy Sunbeam with, we'll actually now go ahead and print out the OpenRC file for the Sunbeam cloud that we've deployed. And at that point, then we can actually then, in the next step, source that. That'll allow us to use the OpenStack client CLI to actually communicate with that Sunbeam cloud. And then we can just kind of do some basic things like list out projects, labors, and images. So go ahead and work through that. And if you have any issues, let us know.
You didn't put accept defaults, would it ask you a bunch of questions?
Yeah, it prompts you with a bunch of interactive prompts that says basically like which type of networking are you using? Are you setting up VLAN? Are you setting up VXLAN? What type? What your network range is that you want for your subnets, types of things. So it's doing that level of configuration, which is beyond just what's on the base cloud. This is where you're starting to add your configuration to it.
And if I wanted to configure specifically, let's say, glance in a certain way,
Okay.
how would I do that? Or do I have to wait till it's deployed, edit the glance configuration file and restart something?
So it depends on how you want to configure Glance. So like if you wanted to add an additional backend storage or something of that nature. The way that that should work within Sunbeam is you would through optional features. The intention is to provide, enable this optional feature, and that optional feature may be backend storage. Simon happens to be affiliated with backend storage, I know that, so. It would then enable that backend storage for all the services that are enabled, and it would make sense. So it would add a glance store as necessary, right? So you could configure the glance store. It would add the sender driver storage, things like that. And it could be prompting the user for additional information for like what type of
So things like the volume, the sort of volume type would be required for things like that. If you're going to be doing multi-store for glance,
Yeah.
if you've got multi backends, you need to have the volume type specified. So is that something you could do during this configure, or is that because it's dependent on other things, it becomes a catch-22 and therefore you need to do it after the fact?
Yeah, so the way that we've envisioned it at this point, so working through it may reveal something slightly different. But the way we envision it is as you're doing the enablement of like the storage driver and the storage plugin, that's where you define the volume types that you would actually have this associated. Especially because you can also say, I want to enable, storage array X, enable storage array X. I want to enable storage array X, and they're servicing different types of things within the same storage array. You could have them as multiple backends within
Different QoS settings.
Exactly. So you can actually provide that, configure it at that point in time with, I'm going to enable this particular storage feature, and it's like a one shot. What does it actually get deployed?
Related question. It sounds like you're sort of modeling the allowed configuration for the different services. Like, this combination of config for these services is something we support.
Yeah.
That require you to sort of maintain every feature for.
So that's a really good question, right? And so, James, you're on the call, and I'm going to say this out loud so you can hear it because it's a really good question. Essentially, it's we have essentially an opinionated set of configuration options that apply for the services that are deployed. And that means that we then have to understand all the possible combinations, permutations, and test those as far as being a supported set of scenarios. And is that what we're doing so that we can actually maintain them? The answer is yes-ish, right? So it's very, we're limiting the number of configuration options. In some cases, you can actually, there are knobs within OpenStack that exist, really shouldn't exist, right? Like, that's VLAN ranges do you want to actually do to allow the administrator to configure? Well, allow them on, let the administrator, which is locked down to the administrator, actually choose the VLAN ranges that they want to do. You don't want to have to go and apply configuration management to allow that, and then to go be able to actually enable those. So there's some examples of some configuration options that exist out there that shouldn't exist, or they have a history and a legacy set of information behind them and why they exist around. Exposing it directly makes it complicated because we really try and we think about it as we're trying to expose a feature or a capability, and there should be a set of known practices and configurations that apply to most particular clouds. There will always be some that are unique to that particular cloud, but we should try and minimize what that actual delta is and choose them to turn on with intention. I know that we do work with various, or we do have contributors into other parts of our ecosystem around enabling network drivers, enabling storage drivers, enabling identity providers, different types of things like that. And generally, the first thing that they want to do is they want to be able to, like, here's all my knobs and whistles. I want to be able to turn each and every single one of them. And the conversation that we try and have going back is like, okay, which ones are really needed? And then let's turn the other ones on as we actually figure out different use cases for it. I know that some people, I'll just say Simon because he's in the room. Simon has heard me say this before when we've been working and collaborating on some different things. It's like, what do you need turned on? What do you not need turned on? Can we come up with a reasonable set of defaults that just work? that it's less brain power for people to actually have to figure out how to make it right, because it's far easier to set something wrong than it is to set something right. So,
Thank you for that.
yeah.
For context, part of the reason I ask is I'm maintaining a fork of Cola Ansible with a variety of user experience levels deploying my fork of Cola Ansible. So I'm running into all these same issues. So I'm
Yes.
curious about, your philosophy towards it.
Yes, so our philosophy is to be opinionated about it, which is not always what everyone wants to hear about it, like especially like a place, kind of like in an OpenInfra conference, we go to different types of conferences. There's a lot of people that want like, oh, this is my use case and I need this particular thing tweaked, and this is my use case and I need this particular thing tweaked. And the answer may be that's true for you. But in general, if you want to be able to support it and maintain it, like really just be opinionated about it. And if you convince me otherwise, kind of that you need this and it's actually worth my time of taking that maintainership and ownership of those particular configurations. Because every time, even a Boolean option, every time you add one, you just double the number of test cases, right? So, yeah.
So from that,
Yeah.
an opinionated list of projects. So things like if I wanted Watcher, for example, is that in Sunbeam or is that something that would have to be added as a request?
Watcher's an interesting choice because Watcher is being added to Sunbeam at this moment in time.
There you go.
I think it just landed within the last week or two.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, let's
in-
pick something else like
What's that, James?
Masakari or
coincidentally, that and landed into
doing that one as well, aren't you?
well. So, yeah. So there is for each project that we want to add to Sunbeam, there is a piece of enablement to integrate that into the Sunbeam experience, so that it becomes a first-class feature within Sunbeam. What I would say is that some of the value that Sunbeam's delivering is that the actual charms that we use for deploying each of the components and how they get integrated is actually quite lightweight. So it's not typically a huge amount of effort to bring in a new feature or top level component. That's certainly the case for Watcher. Masakari was a bit more complicated because of the way we're doing observation of the availability of hypervisors and stuff like that. We brought console into the mix, and that's taking a little bit longer because there's a bit more complexity there. But really what we're trying to do is bring in features. So you won't find a Sunbeam enable Watcher, you'll find a Sunbeam enable, whatever we call it, resource optimization or whatever. So we're trying to bring in like a feature which might bring in additional projects to the deployment and enable new bits and pieces, but it also might configure what's already deployed in a specific way for a specific purpose.
And I think the reason to kind of double down on that is we've seen throughout time, like there's one OpenStack project will come along, let's say firewall as a service version 2, or neutron load balancing, it moves over to Octavia. And so like really the thought there is what people really want to get is a set of services, a capability. And that may map to a specific implementation of what this is under the covers today. That may change, but that doesn't change what the requirement of what you're actually looking for is. You're looking for
that makes sense. So just you're not going to call it enable Watcher, you're going to call it enable resource management or something like that. So that makes sense. But I guess there would be process to request something like that if it was, if I wanted Barbican in there, and Barbican wasn't him. I don't know whether it maybe is already, but maybe if I wanted Barbican in there,
so secret
that, and that would,
so
in the same way you would with any project.
Yeah, the question would then be is like, how do you enable that, and how do you put in the work for it?
Yeah.
Like, there's two ways of going about that type of request. So I think one, as an example that we've gotten a few times, is Zoom. Right, we like to get containers through Zoom, and my team right now that I'm seeing in work a lot of this, we have no interest in Zoom at this point in time. It's not a high priority for us to actually do. However, if there was a community contributor that wanted to come along and actually contributed to the actual Sunbeam code base, we would be happy to work with them to actually bring that along and talk about how to do it. But we wouldn't be actually looking at taking that work on, just kind of guiding them, bringing them
good thing to mention, Sunbeam is open source, so if you do have something you'd like to contribute or all that.
No, I mean, it's always a debate. I mean,
Yeah.
there's the whole, how do you contribute to open source successfully?
Yeah, yeah.
Don't fork.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've just got visions of people asking for Magnum.
Yeah. No. They're not visions.
So is it effectively anything that's got a charm today? Project that has a charm is highly likely to go into Sunbeam.
I think that's a fair statement. Highly likely, but not every single thing is going to go over there. We take a look at it and say, does this make sense in the new world? In some cases, it doesn't, so we don't. Or we can track certain things on who has downloaded things, the stores that you get the charms from, and we can say, oh, there's like one person who's downloaded it in the past year and a half. Maybe we don't invest time in that type of thing.
Really?
So if you want to see what features are available in the Sunbeam you're deploying, if you just type Sunbeam enable, it will give you a list of the top level features that we already have enabled. Watch is actually in the version we're deploying today.
Barely hear you, but I think what you said, James, was if you want to see which features have actually been enabled in your Sunbeam cloud that's actually already been deployed, you just list Sunbeam
Enable. Sunbeam enable.
Sunbeam enable.
Yeah.
We'll list the actual set of features that have been.
Yeah.
So CAS, DNS, LDAP, LBs. Okay.
That's protocol.
Or
Vault, like the HashiCorp vault.
Oh.
Yeah.
fair enough.
We do a secret management.
As is Magnum.
As is Magnum, it's an experimental feature at this point in time. It likely won't graduate to the.
It doesn't have, never got it to work.
I've never got it to work, yeah.
Never.
Well, if you need to get it to work, there's someone right behind you, actually. In this room, not more than 2 hours ago, he was running a workshop on.
There you go, I should've-
Magnum.
Yeah. All right, so obviously I know that we've had good conversations here about Sunbeam, but just wanted to kind of come back to the commands here. Is everyone good? Were they able to hit their demo RC file and actually read Sunbeam? Sweet. So I'll actually go ahead and move on here. And we'll go ahead and do just like a really quick exercise at actually creating a server instance with Nova here. So you'll kind of see the first command here. It's just basically like, obviously you have some kind of key pair that you would want to go ahead and inject into the instance. In this case, like we just have like a default ID RSA key. So you'll just copy it because like obviously one thing to actually mention about the strict confinement of snaps is that you can control directories you have access to. So basically I can set it such that like, oh, this application I installed via Snap is only able to access the home directory. It can't scan out anything else, so it can't like look at file system, all that. And so the idea is by actually moving it to the home directory, then at that point, we just read that because like obviously .ssh will usually have sensitive access credentials and all that. So you don't just want some random application you install to be able to read that. Obviously not that Sunbeam's random, but for Snaps to be able to actually access that directory, they have to declare it something they need to use. So here, you'll just kind of see with the OpenStack CLI here, you'll go ahead and actually create a key pair. So you'll just feed it the public key that we copied, and then just name it demo key pair. After that, just in the CLI, go ahead and create a server. So there's already been some precedes with that accept default. So for example, there's already been a Ubuntu server image that's been created and hosted in class. So that's 2204 LTS. And then just some default flavors, so like M1 medium. And then you just go ahead and inject the key pair there and give it a name of test. Then after that, you'll want to go ahead and actually create a floating key. So if you want a bit of a chance to work through this, and then once you're all good, just give me a thumbs up, and then we'll go ahead and move to the half of actually setting up and creating a server.
minimum hardware requirement?
Question.
So for the minimum hardware requirement, the specific numbers will actually be listed in the Sunbeam/MicroStack documentation. But the way I've seen it is you have 4 cores at least.
Yeah, we have a minimum
Yeah.
of 4 cores and 16 gigs. We won't
Yeah.
stop you at installing below that, but we give you like really nasty gnarly warnings for being underpowered. Obviously, that's like a toy instance that you want to play around with and use in your home lab or something like that. From an actual, I want to put this on production or something like that, like you should really make sure that you want to.
I'm just thinking about the lab, so 4 cores, 16 gig, disk size,
We need 500 gigs, I think is what we asked for.
and number of NICs,
You can do 1.
You do it with
No,
1?
2, you can do 2.
2.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have 1 for the provider now, and then if you're just doing it all in one, we don't have any external routable access to it. You can just access everything from within there. If you want to be able to access it outside that machine, you need 2 NICs because we ask you to set 1.
But they can both be on the same subnet.
One would be unconfigured.
Oh, you've seen so one's configured and one's unconfigured. Easy.
If we are like deploying just single node, does the control plane and also the applications exist on the single node?
Yeah, this is an all-in-one scenario. Yeah.
Just comparing it with Red Hat.
So you can, what we did is we went through and we bootstrapped and we did the default. What you can actually do is if you bootstrap, you can say, I have this node here that I want this to be my control plane and only run control plane services. So database, MQ, pick your favorite services, etc. goes on the control plane node. And then you can designate the other one as your storage node, and it would actually run over there with hypervisor. So the way that we do that and determine which services go where is based upon which role you actually give the node.
Mhm.
And the node can have 1 to N roles, but the types of roles would exist would be compute, storage, control, and then I think there's a role for infra. I don't remember if we call it infra or something different, but it's basically like supporting type services that we want to run. Like if you want to run your observability back outside of your OpenStack cloud, which is generally a good idea.
And so obviously what wasn't captured here, since we're kind of doing the single node walkthrough, is like actually with that cluster bootstrap that we did a couple slides back. So where we patch the accept defaults, you can also as those roles that Billy mentioned, that's where you could pass that. So you could say when you do Sunbeam cluster bootstrap, you could say like this has role of compute and storage. And then on your cluster node, you could also say like Sunbeam cluster bootstrap control. And the idea is that through multi-node support, effectively what we'll have is like a token that allows us to actually then like cluster the different Sunbeam installations. So they're kind of function as one system, but it's spread across multiple. All right, is everyone good with these commands? Because being conscious of time, we have 17 minutes. So, okay. All right, sweet. Then I'll go kind of to the second part, actually going ahead and creating a server. So the first thing will be is like port list, so just basically seeing like which port you have on that instance you created, actually setting the floating IP address on that port, because that way we'll actually be able to kind of reach that server instance from Sunbeam 0. And then kind of the last 2 commands here is actually just like proving A, you can SSH into it to actually make sure your key pair was injected correctly, and then just like printing the OS release file to just, be like, yay, I'm inside the machine.
Like for add floating IP.
Yeah. This is the way I learned how to do it, so that's how I did it.
You never know which one it's going to add to.
You know, which if there's more than one port.
Yeah.
But you don't care.
Sometimes you do.
Sometimes you do.
What, running Tempest on it?
Yes. So there's actually a command called Sunbeam validate. And what Sunbeam validate will do is it will actually take a look at what services are deployed and pick the appropriate ref stack test. And then run those and get against it to give you a result of, is this a valid cloud? Does it actually test it?
There's also a nice command. I was actually using it when I was putting together this workshop called Sunbeam Inspect as well. And it can actually help you kind of debug some issues that your cloud is having, which is really nice because, obviously distributed systems are very complicated. So being able to have like tools that assists with like identifying what could have potentially gone wrong during deployment, or if there's some other like configuration issues, that's really helpful as well.
So, following on from the Tempest thing, further down the line, when we have external storage, for example, Cinder drivers, we will be able to do things like pull the Cinder Tempest plugin in. Well,
The question is, will we be able to pull in the external Tempest plugin? So for like my storage vendors, Tempest drivers, things like that. The answer was, let's talk. I don't know.
Let's follow up. Yeah.
I think we should. I think it absolutely should be part of the story there.
makes sense.
I don't know how to do that at this moment in time, so that's why I said we should talk and figure out what that is.
15 minutes left until the break, okay?
All right.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Be a little heads up.
15-minute warning.
I got a little cooking timer here. So, now everything's going. All right, are folks SSH'd inside the unit? Are they able to print the file? All right, excellent. So at this point, wrap up here. As I like to say it, okay, we go back to the start of the workshop where I had that email that I should have read sooner rather than later that was like, hey, I need you to have an educated opinion about OpenStack. You kind of see the benefit there of where using Sunbeam, you're able to get started a lot quicker than say you would be with like traditional deployment solutions. So I like to put it, start using OpenStack in 60 minutes. So as we found, you only had to really wait 20 minutes for kind of a simple single node instance to actually deploy and set itself up instead of a traditional amount of time. And then I kind of like to say, Sunbeam is the OpenStack you know and love, but without the additional complexity. That's how I would put it. So the idea is that even though, you kind of have a different interface for going ahead and deploying it, Sunbeam Flutter Bootstrap, you're still able to perform, the common operations that you would expect, like creating servers, creating floating IPs, all that. So yes, obviously, we've had this workshop here today. It's not all that Sunbeam can actually do. So obviously, we've had a lot of really great questions about kind of additional capabilities, like enabling different things. Also say like, okay, like how do I contribute and actually bring in features that I want to have. So if you scan this QR code here, that'll actually take you to the documentation for Sunbeam. So it's called MicroStack. That's kind of how it's branded by Canonical. Sunbeam is a upstream open source project. And so the idea is that if you go to that website, it'll take you through kind of the single node setup instructions, but it'll also take you through like a tutorial on how to do multi-node support and different things that Sunbeam can actually do.
How different is MicroStack as the branded canonical version of Sunbeam than upstream Sunbeam? Oh, okay.
I think the additional difference that is part of like a canonical branded offering around it is we offer the pro enablement as a feature. Kind of a thing we do.
And if people contribute to Sunbeam, presumably there is a whole CI gateway that we have to go through. And
new and improved, it's all running in the, most of it's all running in the upstream CI gate. So it's all running there versus having, you can still add third-party drivers, but with historical stuff, we basically ran third-party drivers everywhere. Third-party CIs.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yes. So yeah, if you go ahead and check out the documentation, you can kind of do more interesting stuff. So first of all, obviously after this workshop, go ahead and blow out all those instances because I don't want to be held responsible for the EC2 bill and all that, or anybody logging in or doing things we might not want them to be doing. But you can actually go through tutorial here for like the single node deployment. So what we've gone through today, you can obviously use the slides. See kind of where, we helped cover the ground in some certain aspects, actually pre-provisioning those instances for you, but you can actually follow through and do it yourself, set it up, try it out. Yeah. If you're in the OpenStack matrix now, at the end of the presentation here, but if you scan that QR code, that's just goes again back to the OpenStack Sunbeam matrix room that we have. And there, you have any questions that kind of come up afterwards, you can send it there. And a lot of our engineers that work on the project actually hang out in there. I also hang out in there. And yeah, just fire up your questions and people will get back to you. So with that, thank you for coming. Thank you for actually participating. Great questions. Really nice to see people contributing. I think it helped that Billy and I were like, all right, how are we going to do this? How are we going to set it up for all the different partner cloud instances and all that, so that everyone was going to have access to resources. So thank you. Now, give an opportunity to ask any potential final questions that you might have, and I'm going to distribute stickers to all our wonderful participants here, and so you can tell me which ones you want. I have a bunch, so if you want more than one, feel free to say so. Yes, any questions from the audience?
When deploying the OpenStack in the background, does it use ironic?
Oh, no, it doesn't use ironic.
Wow.
To do the deployment. So in this case, what you saw there when you were running it, it's just doing it all on the same node that you installed it on. And it's just setting that node up by installing Kubernetes and then setting up the Juju piece, then install the services inside there. If you are the bare metal deployment choice that's part of Sunbeam today is MAZ as a bare metal. That's not to say that there's not going to be other deployment tools or practitioners. Bare metal partition is just Canonical's making the investment. Canonical chose to invest in adding an upstream or a MAZ driver that's associated with it. I'll take. So if you were to deploy this in a lab or in a production environment, and you wanted to deploy more than just a few nodes, I would strongly recommend using a bare metal partitioning story of some sort. Sunbeam, when it's just installing MAZ, your configuration within MAZ, and I can show information on how that works. And then Sunbeam will, when you add MAZ to the deployment, it will recognize what you described. So in MAZ, you can take a look at your servers. You can say this disk is for Ceph. This disk is for Ceph. This network is for my floating IPs. This network is for my storage network. This network is for my management network. And so you can pick the different networks that you actually want to tag them, and you define those within that network itself, so that you can understand how everything's connected and see like one pane of glass from your metal. Sunbeam will essentially realize what you actually described in MAZ and make that happen out on the
MAZ is a license.
It's open source as well. It's open source and free to use. If you went to maas.io, you can actually see what that information is there. I think the next time we do a workshop, we're going to have to do a MAZ.
Can we have 3 hours?
Fine, I'll be fine.
Anybody else want some stickers?
Make them to the set.
Okay.
I don't think I made them to the set.
It sort of did, but I didn't want to interrupt your comment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Not like that. Hey. Beach. What?
Speak to you tomorrow.
Right, yes. Tomorrow.
Hey.
10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes.
Question.
Yes.
So I'm always curious where OpenStack adjacent projects are, what platforms and places they're picking for issue tracking, working on the code, collaborating, all of that.
This is where I thought you would go at some point. Right?
I'm looking at microstack.run/docs/software-contrib. I see that so some of the action is happening in the OpenStack snaps namespace on GitHub.
And it's on GitHub. So,
and so
go ahead. No, please go. Finish your question, then I know where you're going with it.
I guess I'm wondering what direction are you trying to take? Are you trying to move toward what upstream OpenStack is doing, or are you trying to move toward a maybe more beginner-friendly, approachable contribution process using tools like GitHub that people may have been exposed to? What I guess is Is there a vision here? Is this pragmatism or a little both?
Pragmatism at this point in time, actually, so. When we started certain parts of the project, they were very much proof of concept and like doing. GitHub was chosen as the place of choice because of convenience and ease and a variety of other things. And then we've moved like the charm repositories, like all the OpenStack related specific charms into an upstream project on OpenInfra. On OpenDev, because we feel that that's exactly where it should be as part of the Open project. How to containers is run on GitHub. And so that's something that's quite appealing is Dev has its own processes. I love Garrett from a Git review process. Like it's way better than GitHub's review cycle and stuff like that. Oh, no, it's true.
Yeah. I mean,
It's a
it's
fact. That's not even up for debate.
it's more capable, but people are scared of it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So this is a long way of saying like we've done some things in GitHub, mostly out of convenience to get going to start with. There are some things that are going to stay in GitHub, like our canonical Ubuntu, like the Ubuntu OpenStack rocks, which are basically OCI images that are built using OCI tooling and GitHub Actions. They're built on. We like the GitHub for some of the snap packaging and the snap work that we do because there's tight integrations into a variety of places and a variety of things. We're bifurcated at this point in time and we know it. We have not yet sat down and said, what's exactly the strategy to reunify?
They're hard choices.
They're
and
very hard choices.
Yeah, and I mean, we've made, in my world, we've gone back and forth on this as well.
It's easy to not make a decision at this moment in time.
Sure.
Than make the wrong decision. We have opinions. We'd like it to be under OpenInfra, but we have invested a lot in the general ecosystem around certain relates to GitHub as well. Yeah. And there's the whole contributor aspect, right? Like the fact that 99% of people coming out of university has GitHub.
Yes.
And
I like it how he looked at me when he said that.
I also looked at CMAR and I looked over here. I think there's something that needs to really be considered there because a lot of people, my humble experience in interviewing college graduates and things, most of them have not really used the Git CLI. They use Git through their IDE. Right?
They think that Git and GitHub are the same thing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant marketing move. But
yeah. It's a great question. It's complicated. It's bifurcated. We don't have a place of where we're painting in the.
Got it. So you're agnostic at this point.
Strictly from the fact that we know that if we do it wrong, it will be.
Yeah. Yeah. No judgment.
No, I would like for us to be consistent. I mean, difficult when you have projects in 17 different places that you're trying to keep track of. Maybe GitLab is the answer.
That's what we use.
Yeah.
Git T, you could use Git T too.
Sure.
I mean, there's Forge Joe. There's like 5 years ago,
Oh, did you say Forge still, like SourceForge or?
Forge Joe.
Forge Joe,
yeah.
Which is a fork of Git T and is the software that runs Codeberg now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 5 years ago, there weren't good choices for a self-hosted Forge, and now they exist, and people are also running GitLab, sort of a fully open source self-hosted way, which
Yeah.
is swimming upstream from what GitLab the company wants you to do, but people are doing it. Anyway, this is a huge tangent now. I've derailed your demo worked great.
Yeah.
All the work that we did was put into it to just basically create the bastions.
Yeah.
Environment. Nice thing is everything works.
Also,
I know that sounds weird. Demos don't always go well.
there's a lot of
All too low.
I also appreciate that when I run Sunbeam enable, that is. See this? My choices are terms that are likely to be familiar to newcomers rather than wonky inside baseball terms.
Yeah.
And
Enable watcher, enable vitrage, like.
so
It
I'm
was
sure not everyone will like that choice, but I appreciate it.
a lot of, we've received feedback on it and standing strong.
Yeah.
This person-
I
standing strong on
think that drags the ecosystem in a healthy direction.
Yeah, I think so too. And it also, like, we've seen projects, like, implementations change and then new projects being born out of the ashes of another one, right?
Yeah. And if you don't follow the family tree, then you don't know that Octavia used to be
Right.
Elbaz or whatever.
You missed one family holiday. One family holiday.
You missed one reunion.
Yeah.
So. I have.
I think at this point, pretty much, yeah, time's up.
Time is up.
Yeah, we did it. We got through it, and you deployed OpenStack. How cool is that? In an hour, you did OpenStack.
Made it so easy, Jason. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
So, thanks, James, if you're still there.
4:16.
Yes.
Well,
One of them just.
work hard to make sure that the demo worked and all that. So, appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for being live support.
That's okay.
Awesome.